Here's a 45-minute course on advertising marketing. This is an essential part of business. 6% of your entire budget should be spent on advertising and marketing. Let's learn a little bit more about the art and the science.
Hi everybody, meet Timmy. Today, Timmy's going to learn about psychology and advertising. Psychology has always been an essential component of advertising. Advertising's main functions are to inform, persuade, and influence. Today, we'll be focusing on persuasion. One of the most widely accepted models of persuasion that is often associated with advertising is the elaboration likelihood model. The elaboration likelihood model, otherwise known as the ELM, is the theory identifying two ways a communication can be persuasive: the central route or peripheral route. The route which is taken is dependent upon the abilities of processing and the motivation of the receiver. That's you, Timmy. Let's spell it out for you, Timmy. Here is the central route. This is a direct route of persuasion that appeals to logic and involves a great deal of thought. The central route is associated with high involvement. Involvement is how much time, energy, and other resources you are willing to put into the process. How much attention do you want to put into it, Timmy? Let's say you really want a new car, and you see an advertisement for a car on TV. Because you really want a car, you are highly involved. Now you are more likely to listen to that commercial. Because a car is an expensive investment, it has high perceived risk, which is defined as potential for loss in the pursuit of a desired outcome. By way of the central route, you will look at the facts and use logic to make your decision. It is more effective when the facts and arguments are more believable, and then you will buy that car, Timmy. This route often leads to more permanent attitude change. Remember, Timmy, this is a dual process model. Dual means two, Timmy. Let's look at the alternative, the peripheral route. In this route, the receiver, that's still you, Timmy, does not think carefully about a communication and is influenced instead by superficial cues. Examples of these cues or gimmicks include an emotional story, bright colors, sappy music, or an attractive speaker. Low involvement is associated with the peripheral route because the message content becomes relatively unimportant and ignored. The results of the peripheral route are more temporary and subject to change, as these cues play to the senses, emotions, and feelings. Yes, that's right, Timmy. Feelings. And now a word from our sponsors. Today's program is brought to you by Colors. Colors, 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 the most important and effective aspect of advertising. Psychologists report that color impression can account for 60 to 70% of consumer reaction. Let's meet the colors. First up is red. Red increases blood pressure, heart rate, appetite, grabs attention, and stimulates quick decision making. Meet pink. Pink is associated with sweetness and is often used in the sales of candy and pastries. And then there's orange. Orange causes people to feel energetic and is often found in fast food restaurants. Prolonged exposure to orange can make one become very aggressive. Up next is yellow. Yellow is the first color processed by the human eye, so it is often used to draw attention. Say hi to green. Green is a relaxing color often found in hospitals. In the current trend to go green, it often represents things which are environmentally friendly and natural. Let's welcome blue. Blue is the most popular, favorite color among adults. It is often used to sell jewelry and is the color of loyalty. Blue can also add a nauseating effect to food. Purple, come on down! Purple is one of the most difficult colors to produce. It is often associated with the royal, rich, and luxurious. And next we have brown. Brown is favored by men over women and often used to represent that which is natural and of the earth. Brown represents solidity and strength. And here comes black. Black represents power, sophistication, and formality. It's used to make other colors pop and a preferred color for type for increased readability. And finally there's white. White represents cleanliness and purity to many people. White can also imply simplicity, newness, and high technology. And next time you need to advertise, remember what colors can do for you. And now back to Timmy and his feelings. You see, Timmy, your feelings have a huge impact on how you're persuaded and how you spend your money. The ultimate goal of advertising. Feelings can also be referred to as affect. Affect occurs rapidly and involuntarily in response to a stimulus, like advertising. There is positive affect, such as joy, hope, or pleasure, and negative affect, like anger, fear, and shame. These strongly shape your behavior and risk perception, Timmy. And did you know advertisers often rely on the affect heuristic to predict how you might respond to an advertisement, as well as your corresponding behavior? Well, Timmy, I sense your confusion. Let me define that for you. The affect heuristic refers to decisions that are determined by affective considerations, such as our feelings of like and dislike, or good and bad. It basically works like this, Timmy. If a stimulus arouses a negative effect, the receiver, haha, yes, Timmy, that's still you, will perceive the risks as higher and the benefits potentially lower. Conversely, if the stimulus yields a positive effect in the receiver, Timmy here will judge the related risks as low and the benefits higher, and increase the chances you will buy the product. This is why advertisements often contain positively charged emotional images and slogans, as well as the basic factual information. The amalgamation of these elements work through the central and peripheral routes. Do you see that, Timmy? How I brought that back around? And that is how psychology in advertising works. Since we've come full circle, it seems it's time to say goodbye for today. Say goodbye, Timmy, and join us next time to find out what else Timmy can learn.
Every day is a new chance to show the world how phenomenal you can be. Start today with the confidence you get from Gillette Fusion Power Phenom. Fusion Power soothing micropulses help you reduce friction so you barely feel the blades. Try the world's most comfortable shave, Fusion Power. The best a man can get.
For a few weeks this winter, McDonald's is bringing you a taste of the Olympic Winter Games. With the new sweet chili sauce, the latest sweet and spicy way to dip, dunk, and devour Chicken McNuggets made with white meat chicken. The very same sauce enjoyed at the Olympic Village.
Hey.
Hi.
So now, you don't have to be an Olympic athlete to eat like one.
New 5 React Gum. Experience may vary. Everyone experiences it differently. New 5 React Gum. Stimulate your senses.
We are together.
This holiday season, help give kids around the world a chance to play. Use your MasterCard to make a purchase from the Canada Collection by Roots, and a donation will be made to Right to Play.
Hello, Anne. I have a little problem. Pain.
Where's the pain?
It's in my lower gluteus.
You got tax pain. There's nothing I can do about that. Next.
Got tax pain? H&R Block can help by getting you the most you're entitled to in just one visit. Walk in with your taxes, walk out with them done. Completely pain-free. We make taxes easy. H&R Block. Come see us today.
The Davis twins are alike in nearly every way, right down to brushing their teeth. So how did only one get gingivitis? Well, more than 1 in 2 Canadians do. That's why I recommend new Crest Pro Health Clinical Gum Protection Toothpaste. It fights plaque at the gum line, helping prevent gingivitis. It's even clinically proven to reverse it in just 4 weeks. And it protects these other areas dentists check most. Looks like the twins are even again. New Crest Pro Health Clinical Toothpaste. Life opens up when you do.
And I'm presenting you the 9-minute marketing crash course. Let's get started. What is marketing supposed to do? Well, marketing should capture the attention of your target market. Then give them hope that reading or listening to the ad will give them enough information to facilitate their making the best decision possible when buying whatever you sell. Then give them a specific, low-risk, easy-to-take action that will further facilitate their ability to make a good decision. Bottom line. The ad should make the prospect feel like they would have to be an absolute fool to do business with anybody else but you, regardless of the price. Now I must ask you, does your marketing currently do this? In a world full of crummy marketing and advertising, almost all advertising does a poor job, if not a terrible job, of 1, getting qualified prospects to pay attention, 2, getting those who do pay attention to remain interested, and 3, building any kind of case for why someone would want to even take action. 4, giving a prospect any kind of option other than a buy it now. And 5, making the advertiser as much money as he or she should be making. So right now, advertising is doing a terrible job of getting anybody to do anything. The history of marketing and advertising plays a large portion in our ineptability to advertise. In the early days of advertising, the late 1800s and early 1900s, most companies competed on a local or even a regional basis. Competition was fierce, and much of the advertising was comparative in nature. See why we're better than them, here's how we stack up against them. This forced advertisers to use their brains when crafting their ads. In post-World War II, everything changed. Americans had unprecedented prosperity, they had unprecedented income, and they had free time that started to grow rapidly. Most significantly, post-World War II brought us the boob tube, television. In 1945, TV was first commercially introduced, and there were fewer than 7,000 sets, and only 9 stations in only 5 markets. By 1951, just 6 years later, there were 12 million black and white TV sets. A year later, 20 million. In 1955, prime-time advertising spots started costing $4,000 a minute. This is 1955. In 1957, Variety magazine reports viewers encountered 420 commercials a week, totaling 5 hours and 8 minutes. This was 50 years ago. Television brought the era of the brand builders. National companies had a new medium to reach the entire United States. Because of the limited supply of ads, costs went up quickly.
commercials shrank from 2 minutes down to 30 seconds, and advertisers had less time to build a case, so the slogans became popular. Aren't you glad you use dial? Ring around the collar, melts in your mouth, not in your hands. Finally, logos became the most cost-effective way to advertising, and McDonald's abandoned their "You deserve a break today" slogan because it cost too much, and they instructed their ad agency to just flash the golden arches as many times as they could in 30 seconds. 1950s to today, national companies made fortunes by advertising on the boob tube. Ad agencies and business schools benchmarked these large companies. Institutional advertising was the calling card of the big, rich companies. So everyone drew the obvious conclusion. That must be how you do it. Ad agencies, business schools, and advertisers don't know any other way but this way. The emulation of the Fortune 500 advertising has been going on for well over 40 years now by all sizes of companies. Institutional and menu board style advertising. Huge budgets. Here's some statistics from 1999. Pepsi spent $1.31 billion on advertising. Procter & Gamble, $2.61 billion. McDonald's, $1.13 billion. General Motors, over $4 billion. Coca-Cola had 300,000 billboards, 20,000 walls with their logo painted on it, 5 million soda glasses, 4 million newspaper impressions in 1930. So the symptoms of the brand builder emulation, the focus is primarily on getting attention. There's heavy reliance on design, pictures, and humor, and the ad agency's C&R formula. Creativity equals 25-year-olds sitting around thinking of bad crap. And repetition gets your brand into the brain enough times. Deficiencies in effectiveness are made up for with repetition, which is fine. And you don't need to listen any further if your ad budget is over $250 million a year. But if it's not, you need to learn to expunge the brand builder emulation from your mindset. So, the days of simple selling. We're going to talk about 10 to 20 years ago, how easy it was to sell. First, you had the seller, and you had the buyer. There were fewer competitors in almost every market. There were fewer choices, and there was low technology, and there was low education needed to convince the buyer to buy what you're selling. So they didn't require much information, and there was low resistance to buying because they needed what you sell, and it was easier to make a buying decision all around. So back then, the seller had the power, and the buyer had very few options. The confidence gap, which is the new paradigm shift to marketing, creates a different picture. First, you have the poor old seller and the mean old buyer, and between them is the confidence gap. There was an entrepreneurial boom, increased technology, there was more competitors, there were more choices, there was increased information available via internet or direct mail for consumers to decide what they were going to buy, and therefore there was increased resistance, longer buying cycles, price competition. Products were all commodities, and they all had identical marketing messages. And because of this, the buyer had the inability to determine one company from the other, and so price became the main issue. Now the buyer has all the power, and the poor seller is at his mercy. So the confidence gap is the buyer's inability to determine whether any of the businesses or any of the products or any of the services are any better or any different or any worse than any of the others. The buyer feels like he doesn't have control, so he stalls, thinks, compares, and tries to gather more information. So back to our picture here. Sales skills start once you cross the confidence gap, and marketing is what crosses the confidence gap. Your marketing needs to be concise and well articulated, should be powerfully stated, it should be low to no pressure, and it should be one-way communication. Lay down all the information that the buyer would need. And the great thing is your marketing materials aren't afraid of rejection. Your marketing, so on the buyer standpoint, your marketing is not obtrusive, should be reviewed at their own pace, reviewed when it's convenient, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, doesn't matter, and they can ignore it if they're not interested, and there's no or low commitment on their part. Thanks a lot. That's a 9-minute marketing crash course. For more information, visit www.commonsuccessuniversity.com or email me at corey@commonsuccess.com.
Researchers have been studying the factors that influence us to say yes to the requests of others for over 60 years, and there can be no doubt that there's a science to how we are persuaded, and a lot of this science is surprising. When making a decision, it would be nice to think that people consider all the available information in order to guide their thinking, but the reality is very often different. In the increasingly overloaded lives we lead, more than ever, we need shortcuts or rules of thumb to guide our decision-making. My own research has identified just 6 of these shortcuts as universals that guide human behavior. They are reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, and consensus. Understanding these shortcuts and employing them in an ethical manner can significantly increase the chances that someone will be persuaded by your request. Let's take a closer look at each in turn.
So, the first universal principle of influence is reciprocity. Simply put, people are obliged to give back to others the form of behavior, gift, or service that they have received first. If a friend invites you to their party, there's an obligation for you to invite them to a future party you are hosting. If a colleague does you a favor, then you owe that colleague a favor. And in the context of a social obligation, people are more likely to say yes to those that they owe. One of the best demonstrations of the principle of reciprocation comes from a series of studies conducted in restaurants. So the last time you visit a restaurant, there's a good chance that the waiter or waitress will have given you a gift, probably at about the same time that they bring your bill. A liqueur perhaps, or a fortune cookie, or perhaps a simple mint. So here's the question. Does the giving of a mint have any influence over how much tip you're going to leave them? Most people will say no, but that mint can make a surprising difference. In the study, giving diners a single mint at the end of their meal typically increased tips by around 3%. Interestingly, if the gift is doubled and 2 mints are provided, tips don't double. They quadruple, a 14% increase in tips. But perhaps most interestingly of all is the fact that if the waiter provides 1 mint, starts to walk away from the table, but pauses, turns back, and says, "For you nice people, here's an extra mint," tips go through the roof. A 23% increase, influenced not by what was given, but how it was given. So the key to using the principle of reciprocation is to be the first to give and to ensure that what you give is personalized and unexpected.
The second universal principle of persuasion is scarcity. Simply put, people want more of those things they can have less of. When British Airways announced in 2003 that they would no longer be operating the twice-daily London-New York Concorde flight because it had become uneconomical to run, sales the very next day took off. Notice that nothing had changed about the Concorde itself. It certainly didn't fly any faster, the service didn't suddenly get better, and the airfare didn't drop. It had simply become a scarce resource, and as a result, people wanted it more. So when it comes to effectively persuading others using the scarcity principle, the science is clear. It's not enough simply to tell people about the benefits they'll gain if they choose your products and services. You'll also need to point out what is unique about your proposition and what they stand to lose if they fail to consider your proposal.
Our third principle of influence is the principle of authority, the idea that people follow the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. Physiotherapists, for example, are able to persuade more of their patients to comply with recommended exercise programs if they display their medical diplomas on the walls of their consulting rooms. People are more likely to give change for a parking meter to a complete stranger if that requester wears a uniform rather than casual clothes. What the science is telling us is that it's important to signal to others what makes you a credible, knowledgeable authority before you make your influence attempt. Of course, this can present problems. You can hardly go around telling potential customers how brilliant you are, but you can certainly arrange for someone to do it for you. And surprisingly, the science tells us that it doesn't seem to matter if the person who introduces you is not only connected to you, but also likely to prosper from the introduction themselves. One group of real estate agents were able to increase both the number of property appraisals and the number of subsequent contracts that they wrote by arranging for reception staff who answered customer inquiries to first mention their colleagues' credentials and expertise. So, customers interested in letting a property were told, "Lettings? Let me connect you with Sandra, who has over 15 years' experience letting properties in this area." Customers who wanted more information about selling properties were told, "Speak to Peter, our head of sales. He has over 20 years' experience selling properties. I'll put you through now." The impact of this expert introduction led to a 20% rise in the number of appointments and a 15% increase in the number of signed contracts. Not bad for a small change informed from persuasion science that was both ethical and costless to implement.
The next principle is consistency. People like to be consistent with the things they have previously said or done. Consistency is activated by looking for and asking for small initial commitments that can be made. In one famous set of studies, researchers found, rather unsurprisingly, that very few people would be willing to erect an unsightly wooden board on their front lawn to support a Drive Safely campaign in their neighborhood. However, in a similar neighborhood close by, 4 times as many homeowners indicated that they would be willing to erect this unsightly billboard. Why? Because 10 days previously, they had agreed to place a small postcard in the front window of their home that signaled their support for a Drive Safely campaign. That small card was the initial commitment that led to a 400% increase in a much bigger but still consistent change. So, when seeking to influence using the consistency principle, the detective of influence looks for voluntary, active, and public commitments, and ideally gets those commitments in writing. For example, one recent study reduced missed appointments at health centers by 18%, simply by asking the patients rather than the staff to write down appointment details on the future appointment card.
The fifth principle is the principle of liking. People prefer to say yes to those that they like. But what causes one person to like another? Persuasion science tells us that there are 3 important factors. We like people who are similar to us, we like people who pay us compliments, and we like people who cooperate with us towards mutual goals. As more and more of the interactions that we are having take place online, it might be worth asking whether these factors can be employed effectively in, let's say, online negotiations. In a series of negotiation studies carried out between MBA students at 2 well-known business schools, some groups were told, "Time is money, get straight down to business." In this group, around 55% were able to come to an agreement. A second group, however, were told, "Before you begin negotiating, exchange some personal information with each other. Identify a similarity you share in common, then begin negotiating." In this group, 90% of them were able to come to successful and agreeable outcomes that were typically worth 18% more to both parties. So to harness this powerful principle of liking, be sure to look for areas of similarity that you share with others and genuine compliments you could give before you get down to business.
The final principle is consensus. Especially when they are uncertain, people will look to the actions and behaviors of others to determine their own. You may have noticed that hotels often place a small card in bathrooms that attempt to persuade guests to reuse their towels and linen. Most do this by drawing a guest's attention to the benefits that reuse can have on environmental protection. It turns out that this is a pretty effective strategy, leading to around 35% compliance. But could there be an even more effective way? Well, it turns out that about 75% of people who check into a hotel for 4 nights or longer will reuse their towels at some point during their stay. So what would happen if we took a lesson from the principle of consensus and simply included that information on the cards and said that 75% of our guests reuse their towels at some time during their stay? So please do so as well. It turns out that when we do this, towel reuse rises by 26%. Now imagine the next time you stay in a hotel, you saw one of these signs. You picked it up and you read the following message. 75% of people who have stayed in this room have reused their towel. What would you think? Well, here's what you might think. I hope they're not the same towels. And like most people, you'd probably think that this sign will have no influence on your behavior whatsoever. But it turns out that changing just a few words on a sign to honestly point out what comparable previous guests have done was the single most effective message, leading to a 33% increase in reuse. So, the science is telling us that rather than relying on our own ability to persuade others, we can point to what many others are already doing, especially many similar others.
So there we have it, 6 scientifically validated principles of persuasion that provide for small, practical, often costless changes that can lead to big differences in your ability to influence and persuade others in an entirely ethical way. They are the secrets from the science of persuasion.
To me, marketing is about values. This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world. And we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. And so we have to be really clear on what we want them to know about us. Now, Apple, fortunately, is one of the half a dozen best brands in the whole world. Right up there with Nike, Disney, Coke, Sony. It is one of the greats of the greats, not just in this country, but all around the globe. And, but even a great brand needs investment and caring if it's going to retain its relevance and vitality. And the Apple brand has clearly suffered from neglect in this area in the last few years. And we need to bring it back. The way to do that is not to talk about speeds and feeds. It's not to talk about MIPS and megahertz. It's not to talk about why we're better than Windows. The dairy industry tried for 20 years to convince you that milk was good for you. It's a lie, but they tried anyway. And the sales were going like this. And then they tried Got Milk, and the sales are going like this. Got Milk doesn't even talk about the product. Matter of fact, it focuses on the absence of the product. But the best example of all, and one of the greatest jobs of marketing the universe has ever seen is Nike. Remember, Nike sells a commodity. They sell shoes. And yet, when you think of Nike, you feel something different than a shoe company. In their ads, as you know, they don't ever talk about the product. They don't ever tell you about their air soles and why they're better than Reebok's air soles. What does Nike do in their advertising? They honor great athletes and they honor great athletics. That's who they are. That's what they are about. Apple spends a fortune on advertising. You'd never know it. You'd never know it. So, when I got here, Apple just fired their agency. We were doing a competition with 23 agencies that, 4 years from now would pick one. And we blew that up, and we hired Chiat, the ad agency that I was fortunate enough to work with years ago. We created some award-winning work, including the commercial voted the best ad ever made in 1984 by advertising professionals. And we started working about 8 weeks ago. And the question we asked was, our customers want to know who is Apple and what is it that we stand for? Where do we fit in this world? And what we're about isn't making boxes for people to get their jobs done, although we do that well. We do that better than almost anybody in some cases. But Apple's about something more than that. Apple, at the core, its core value, is that we believe that people with passion can change the world for the better. That's what we believe. And we've had the opportunity to work with people like that. We've had an opportunity to work with people like you, with software developers, with customers who have done it in some big and some small ways. And we believe that in this world, people can change it for the better. And that those people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that actually do. And so what we're going to do in our first brand marketing campaign in several years is to get back to that core value. A lot of things have changed. The market's a totally different place than it was a decade ago. And Apple's totally different, and Apple's place in it is totally different. And believe me, the products and the distribution strategy and the manufacturing are totally different, and we understand that. But values and core values, those things shouldn't change. The things that Apple believed in at its core are the same things that Apple really stands for today. And so we wanted to find a way to communicate this. And what we have is something that I'm very moved by. It honors those people who have changed the world. Some of them are living, some of them are not. But the ones that aren't, as you'll see, you know that if they'd ever used a computer, it would have been a Mac. And the theme of the campaign is Think Different. It's the people, honoring the people who think different and who move this world forward. And it is what we are about. It touches the soul of this company. So I'm going to go ahead and roll it, and I hope that you feel the same way about it I do.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Does advertising really work? U.S. companies spend around $170 billion on advertising yearly, so they seem to think it does. Successful advertising uses a variety of tricks and techniques to influence the consumer. They evoke positive memories and emotions that affect our behavior over time and prompt us to buy something at a later date. Marketing needs to reach the subconscious levels of the brain in order for it to work. People don't like to think that they are easily influenced. Humans instinctively look at something that someone else is looking at, so ads often include a model looking right at the main target or message. It's best to use happy faces in ads because we have mirror neurons that prompt us to mimic the expression of the person we are looking at. People find faces with dilated pupils more attractive. Most major advertisers increase the pupil size of their models in Photoshop. If you position a product toward a viewer's dominant hand in an ad, it heightens the imagined product use. Researchers experimenting with images of cups, bowls, and sandwiches encountered the greatest success when appealing to the right-hand side. Colors have powerful associations in ads. Brands choose the colors of their logos based on what they're trying to convey. Red connotes action, excitement, and youth. Green implies freshness, growth, and health. Blue shows trust, confidence, and security. Ads often prime the consumer by naming a higher price beforehand so their price is not so bad in comparison. To persuade the consumer that their product is superior, advertisers use techniques like the weasel claim. It's vague and ambiguous but sounds true enough that consumers believe the claim. The unfinished claim, which argues that the product is better or has more of something but does not finish the comparison. The endorsement or testimonial, where a celebrity or authority claims to use the product when they often don't. In the 70s, Miller Lite commercials featured sports legends and celebrities, and their beer sales increased from 7 million barrels to 31 million. And the rhetorical question, which demands a response in such a way that validates the product's merits. After the launch of Got Milk, sales of milk in California rose 7% in just 1 year. So what do you think? Got brainwashed?